Hi, 2023 is behind us and there were many concerns around cloud security last year. Some of the major concerns were data loss, data leakage, and accidental exposure of data. These threats cost organizations millions of dollars. My name is Nakul and I welcome you all to Tech Treats, the Opcito Podcast. In this podcast, we are going to talk about cloud security and later we will be focusing on security aspects for AWS Cloud. But first, let me elaborate more on the security concerns last year, one by one, and the impact they had on the IT world. First in the list is data loss. As per our latest survey that involved more than 250 stakeholders in 70 different organizations worldwide, 69% of organizations point to data loss or data leakage as their greatest cloud security concern. Second on the list is failure to comply with data privacy, security, and regulatory compliances. Data protection regulations like EU's GDPR, HIPAA, PCI DSS, and many others mandate the protection of customer data and impose strict penalties in case of failure to comply with. Additionally, organizations have their own internal data that they need to protect. Third on the list is accidental exposure of credentials. Now, it may sound naive, but a lot of people, even the ones working in the IT, have been a victim to this. Phishers commonly use cloud applications and environments as a pretext in their phishing attacks. With the growing use of cloud-based emails like G Suite, Microsoft 365, and document sharing services such as Google Drive, Dropbox, or OneDrive, employees have been accustomed to receiving emails with links that might ask them to confirm their account credentials before giving access to a particular document or website. This makes it easy for cybercriminals to learn an employee's credentials for cloud services. Accidental exposure of cloud credentials is a major concern for 44% of the organizations that we surveyed, since it potentially compromises the privacy and security of their cloud-based data and other resources. And that is exactly our topic of discussion for today's podcast. With me is Rohini. Welcome, Rohini. Rohini is a senior software engineer at Opcito Technologies with 7+ years of experience in manual automation and security testing. She is a ISTQB CTFL certified QA professional. She is AWS certified solutions architect and is well versed with security testing of AWS cloud ecosystem. Welcome, Rohini. How are you?
I'm doing great, Nakul. Thanks for the introduction and having me on Tech Dates by Opcito.
So now everyone is moving towards cloud. Cloud is getting a lot of transactions, especially after 2010. And there are a lot of aspects to cloud, especially its advantages and the threats that come with it. Threats such as malware attacks, data leakage, unauthorized access, or ransomware attacks, and so on. So a robust cloud security system is becoming essential for all the organizations. So let's just start with what are cloud attacks? What exactly is cloud attack?
So, cloud attack is a cyber attack that mainly targets cloud-based service platforms, such as we have computing services or storage services or any application that is hosted on platform as service or software as service model. As more organizations and individuals rely on cloud computing for storing and processing data, there is a corresponding increase in number of potential targets for attackers. So let me give you an example of Microsoft. So on 22nd January in year 2020, Microsoft announced that one of their cloud databases was breached back in December 2019, resulting in exposure of 250 million entries including email addresses, IP addresses, and support case details. According to computing giant, the cause of this data breach was misconfigured network server that was hosting critical information. While this is not the biggest, but it was one of the most shocking cyber attack due to high profile nature of the target. So another example is Log4j. Many of us know about the Log4j library. It is widely used Java logging library. Okay, so in December 2021, a critical vulnerability named as Log4 shell was discovered in Apache Log4j library, specifically in version 2.0 to 2.14.1. The log shell vulnerability allowed attackers to execute arbitrary code remotely by sending a specially crafted message to applications that use vulnerable log4j library. So this flaw could have been exploited to take control of servers, sensitive data, or launch further attacks. So this example shows that many organizations may not be aware of the risk or vulnerabilities associated with their software or cloud accounts, or may not have sufficient measures in place to protect against these threats.
So, Rohini, coming from the cloud owner's perspective, what are the most common cyber attacks that a cloud owner should be aware of or should take care of?
Okay. So Nakul, let me tell you, first one on the list is the most common. Probably everyone has heard about it. It's the malicious software or malware. So it is basically a program that is created with intent to harm your computer or server or network.
Okay.
So we need to be very careful about what we install on our virtual machines in our cloud account. Next is denial of service, DOS attack. It is malicious targeted attack that floods a network with false requests in order to disrupt business operations. In DOS attack, users are unable to perform routine and necessary tasks such as accessing emails, websites, online accounts, or other resources that are operated by compromised computer or network. While most DOS attacks do not result in lost data or are typically resolved without paying a ransom, they cost organization time, money, or other resources in order to restore critical business operations. Another form of attack is code injection attacks. These attacks consist of an attacker injecting malicious code in a vulnerable computer or network to change its course of action. These are multiple types of code injection attacks. One more attack that I want to highlight here is DNS tunneling. It is type of cyber attack that leverages domain name system, that is DNS queries, and responses to bypass traditional security measures and transmit data and code within the network. Once infected, the hacker can freely engage in command and control activities. This tunnel gives the hacker a route to unleash malware and to extract the data, IP, or other sensitive information by encoding it bit by bit in series of DNS responses. DNS tunneling attacks have increased in recent past years, in part because they are relatively simple to deploy. Tunneling toolkits and guides are even readily accessible online through mainstream sites like YouTube.
Seems like there is a lot that we need to take care of being in the security business. So, Rohini, tell me what are the most common causes of these attacks?
Okay, so the first one in the list and most common one is misconfiguration. We all know that what offerings cloud providers give when it comes to cloud. So organization needs to be very careful while configuring these services to make sure they have robust cybersecurity. So according to IBM, 86% of compromised records are result of misconfigured servers. That is why good knowledge of specific cloud services you are using is necessary to configure it according to your security needs. Another common reason is compromised user accounts. Weak credential protocols are leading causes of compromised user accounts. Many users who work with cloud services do not have strong password protection, as they either use weak passwords, reuse older passwords, or don't change their passwords regularly. As cybersecurity professionals, we encourage users to change their passwords regularly, at least once every 60 or 90 days. The next we have is API vulnerability. It is another common factor that adds to security breaches. API allows user to interact and work with their cloud computing service. These APIs include extensive documentation to allow user to understand and use them effectively. This documentation, however, can be obtained by hackers too and can be used to exploit the APIs to gain access and exfiltrate sensitive data stored in the cloud. Organizations need to strictly monitor the functioning of the APIs to identify any vulnerabilities. And one factor that is little difficult to control is malicious insider activity. Even if organizations implement the most secure cyber ecosystem, a malicious user can negate these security protocols and leak critical information. In fact, over the last few years, there has been reported increase in number of security breaches as a result of insider threats. To nullify insider threats, organization can implement strict access control and limit the amount of information accessed by individuals inside your organization.
And these are just the basic things that can go wrong, right?
Yeah, these are just common causes. If we consider technical aspects, then list is huge.
Wow, seems like there is a lot that we need to take care of. So tell me one thing, Rohini, what we as cloud account owners need to follow to protect our accounts.
Okay. So first thing first, you need to take password policies seriously. Make it mandatory to set complex password and create a policy that will automatically ask to reset passwords every month. Enabling two-factor authentication is another important thing on this checklist. Encryption is the key. Use cloud services that provide encryption options. It allows for data and text to be transformed using encryption algorithm. Also keep a track of who has access to what. Make it mandatory for IT admins to track user access management. It is always advisable to have a system form automated and periodic backups. IT managers should distribute data and applications across multiple zones for added protection, as well as adhere to best practices in daily data backups, offsite storage, and disaster recovery.
As we all know, AWS has been leading the cloud market share for a considerable time now, and there are some security services exclusively provided by AWS. Would you like to elaborate more on those services?
Yes, absolutely. So there are multiple services provided by AWS. I'll talk about few notable ones here. So first one in my list is IAM Access Analyzer. The service scans supported resources policies inside your AWS account and generates a report detailing how access to different resources are organized in its present state. Analyzer provides a bird's eye view of environment without the usual complications. As of now, IAM Access Analyzer supports limited resources, including AWS IAM Identity and Access Management roles, AWS S3 buckets, KMS keys, Lambda functions, and layers. So another one is Amazon Inspector. It automatically discovers workloads such as Amazon EC2 instances, containers, and Lambda functions, and scans them for software vulnerabilities and unintended network exposures. So this is all about Inspector. Another one we have is GuardDuty. GuardDuty is a threat detection service that continuously monitor AWS environments for malicious activity and unauthorized behavior. With its AI-powered insights, GuardDuty helps organizations protect their AWS accounts, workloads, and data from security threats. Understanding your security posture across all of your AWS account is a vital aspect that some of us tend to ignore sometimes. For this, you can use AWS SecurityHub. It automates security best practices checks, aggregates security alerts into single place and format. Another interesting service is AWS Config. The AWS Config service assesses, audits, and evaluates your AWS resource configuration against a defined baseline. It tracks configuration changes and provides detailed resource configuration history that can be used during security audits or for operational troubleshooting or change in management and many more.
So Rohini, you mentioned AWS Inspector. So let's continue on that. How does AWS Inspector help us prevent malware attacks?
Okay. So with Amazon Inspector, we have two main findings that can be valuable for anyone. First is package vulnerability and second is network reachability. So package vulnerability usually contains application layer vulnerabilities. Suppose you have containerized workload on any Amazon EKS or ECS. Then by identifying vulnerabilities in application code or dependencies, you can proactively address security flaws and reduce risk of exploitation by attackers targeting application layer vulnerabilities. If you consider network reachability, then Inspector 2 can detect misconfiguration in AWS security groups and network ACLs that could expose sensitive services or data to unauthorized access. This can prevent exposure of critical assets and reduce the likelihood of unauthorized network intrusion. If you want to know how to set up Inspector 2, then we have mentioned the link in description. You can go through our blog written specifically on Inspector 2 for EC2.
Victor, what about GuardDuty? How does AWS GuardDuty help augment your cloud security?
Okay. So now there are multiple ways how GuardDuty can augment your security setup. So first is unauthorized access. GuardDuty can detect and alert on unauthorized attempts to access AWS resources such as instances or S3 buckets from suspicious IP addresses or unusual geolocations. This can prevent unauthorized access to sensitive data and resources. Second is credential compromise. GuardDuty alerts if there are any signs of compromised credentials, such as unusual API calls or usage patterns, indicative of credential theft or misuse. With early detection, you can take prompt action to revoke access and mitigate potential damage. Then comes the malicious activity. GuardDuty identifies and blocks malicious activities such as command and control communications or exploitation attempts. In addition, GuardDuty can help you with the identification of malicious activity or to prevent cryptojacking or for data exfiltration as well.
Okay. So Rohini, I remember you also mentioned SecurityHub. How does SecurityHub help in cloud security?
In my opinion, best use of SecurityHub is as centralized security management system or for monitoring compliance issues. By aggregating and analyzing security findings from multiple AWS services such as GuardDuty, Inspector, and Messi, SecurityHub provides a comprehensive view of security and compliance posture across the AWS infrastructure. Apart from that, SecurityHub provides built-in compliance standards and best practices, helping organizations ensure adherence to industry standards and regulatory requirements, such as PCI DSS, HIPAA, GDPR, and CIS benchmarks. Security and compliance checks. This allows organizations to continuously monitor their AWS environment for security threats, vulnerabilities, and compliance deviation. Streamline remediation through integrated AWS services and third-party tools.
And I think you also mentioned AWS config, right? So how does AWS config help in cloud security?
So AWS config is a complete configuration management and compliance auditing tool for AWS resources.
Okay.
Configuration management tool because AWS config provides a detailed inventory of AWS resources and their configurations, enabling organization to track changes over time and maintain a comprehensive view of their AWS infrastructure. And I think one of the best feature of AWS config is AWS config automatically records changes to AWS resources and their configuration settings. This allows organization to track resource history, identify who made the changes, and assess the impact of those changes. For example, suppose if attacker modifies security group or IAM policies to gain access of the resources, such as making S3 bucket publicly accessible or opening port of EC2, or suppose attacker got access and they scaled up instance or changed encryption setting of your RDS, then all of it is immediately highlighted by AWS config through an alert. Another thing I like about AWS config is resource relationship. AWS config captures resource relationships and dependencies, allowing organization to understand how changes to one resource may impact others. This helps in planning and managing complex AWS environments effectively.
Okay, Rohini, that was very insightful, especially for people who are in the security business. And I think your information on AWS's arsenal of security tools will help us to augment our cloud security. And thanks to all the viewers who joined us today for this episode of Tech Treats by Opcito. We will be coming up with another hot topic in our next episode. Thank you.